Welcome to Imagine Peace, the podcast that invites you on a transformative journey toward a world filled with harmony and understanding. Together, let's ignite the flame of peace within ourselves and radiate it outward so we can have a future where unity prevails. This is Imagine Peace, where dreams become reality. Join us as we explore the power of compassion, the beauty of diversity, and the potential for positive change. Welcome, everyone, to a new episode of Imagine Peace. I'm MarBeth Dunn with my beautiful partner, Teri Angel. And today we have a very amazing, wonderful, fabulous guest, Fleet Maull, PhD. He's an author, meditation teacher, social entrepreneur, business consultant, executive coach, and trainer who works at the nexus of personal and social transformation. He is an Acharya senior Dharma teacher in the global Shambhala meditation community and a Roshi, a Zen master in the International Zen Peacemaker Order. Dr. Maull founded Prison Mindfulness Institute and National Prison Hospice Association and co-founded the Rwanda Bearing Witness Retreat, the Center of Mindfulness in Public Safety, and the Engaged Mindfulness Institute. He trains prisoners, business leaders, correctional officers, law enforcement, and other public safety professionals in mindfulness-based approaches to wellness and resiliency. He offers business consulting and executive coaching through Windhorse Seminars and Consulting and online seminars and summits through Heart Mind Institute. He's the author of Radical Responsibility, How to Move Beyond Blame, Fearlessly Live Your Highest Purpose, and Become an Unstoppable Force for Good, and Dharma in Hell, the Prison Writings of Fleet Maull. So, wow, that is quite a bio. And I know that you also have had Bearing Witness retreats in Auschwitz. Would you like to start there and tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. Well, thank you for having me today, and great to connect with your audience, with you and your audience. And I've been going to Auschwitz for over 20 years. I've been one of the leaders of a retreat there that we call a Bearing Witness Retreat, the Auschwitz-Birkenau Bearing Witness Retreat. It was started by my Zen teacher, Roshi Bernie Glassman. He went there and I think around 94, went to a interfaith or multi-faith event there and had an experience of feeling like the place was, that there was a lot of sort of unfinished spiritual energy there, a lot of disembodied spirits, a lot of people needing to be remembered and healed. And he vowed to bring a retreat there, a healing retreat there. And so 2 years later, he managed to do the first one. There were about 150 people from all over North America and Europe, and we've been coming ever since. The first one was in 1996. I first went, I was still incarcerated at that time. So I think I got out in 1999, and I think the first time I went was probably 2000 or 2001, as soon as I could get a passport and go, because it was very much a rite of passage within the Zen peacemaker tradition that I was practicing in. And yeah, I've been going ever since. And it's an incredibly powerful retreat. The people that come each year are, again, from all over North America and Europe, but also from the Middle East, from Latin America, from Asia. And many people come to the retreat who are of Jewish descent and who have a family history with the Holocaust and even in particular with Auschwitz. We also have a lot of German participants who have their own, obviously, history. And we've even had some over the years who had relatives who were connected with the Nazi Party, or even in a few cases, some relatives who served as guards at the camps.
Wow.
And we've almost always had survivors with us. Now, there's very few survivors left. Those who are still with us were young children when they're in the camp. One of them, the mother of a business client of mine and friend, joined us in 2020 or when we did an on kind of hybrid online and in-person version because few people could travel at that time. But anyway, there are not many survivors left. But during my more than 20 years of coming, we've almost always had one or two survivors who were literally spent time in that camp with us on the retreat. So it's a very, very powerful experience. People come out of that retreat inspired to work to prevent genocide in the world, to prevent war and conflict, to do good work in the world, to do peace work. And so it's been kind of a font of all kinds of projects and peace work around the world. Strong connection with the Middle East. We've had both Christian and Islamic Palestinians come, and we've had Israeli Jews come, and we've had Palestinians who were Israeli citizens and who are not. It's hard for those who are not to get passports, but we have managed to get a few of our friends there to be able to come from time to time. And of course, we were over there just recently in the middle of this terrible conflict that's happening in Gaza and this horrific, really unspeakable conflict. And so none of our Palestinian or Israeli friends were able to come. One couple who've been very involved in the leadership team, like myself, and have been coming every year for quite some time, wanted to stay there and continue their peace work on the ground. They felt they were very needed. They were doing relief work and peace work, but it's a very, very powerful experience. We actually spend almost all day in the camps for 5 days. We stay in a place called the Dialogue Center, which we can walk to the camps from there. It's very close. There's a lot of processes. We're in small sharing circles every morning, and in the camps there's various ceremonies and religious ceremonies and secular ceremonies and different ways of bearing witness to the reality of what happened there. And so it's a deep experience. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that sounds so amazing. And thank you for the work that you're doing in regards to peace. So let me ask you, what does world peace mean to you?
Well, boy, that's a deeper question than one might think right off the bat. Yeah. I think it's impossible to kind of not connect justice and peace. We could ask everybody in the world to just vow right now, just be peaceful and don't argue and don't go to war and don't be in conflict. But those who are in very oppressed situations would say, well, that's just going to perpetuate the status quo, right? So, and yet there are justice movements that are highly unpeaceful. And I think maybe they win some battles, but I'm not sure if they're winning or losing the war or if they're really, moving us closer to peace or not. So I think there has to be some balance. I think there has to be a balance of peace work and justice work. Martin Luther King very famously said something, I'm paraphrasing here. He said, love without power is weak, and power without love is something like just brutal or aggressive or violence. So we need that balance of both love and power, of peace and justice. So I think the more we can develop a world where we're never going to, everybody's not going to have exactly the same opportunities, and people aren't the same, and we all have different backgrounds and talents and possibilities, but to even the playing field as much as we possibly can, and to have a global society as well as in our various communities and countries where clearly there is a momentum towards evening the playing field, where there's a strong collective intent to make the playing field as even for everyone as possible, that everyone has access to resources, and everyone who's willing to, step up and do their part in moving their own life forward has the opportunity to do that. And so that's a big part of it. It also has to do with healing our relationship with the planet and dealing with human-caused climate change. And because, we're not in a peaceful relationship with our own home, Mother Earth, and the effects of human-caused climate change are just going to exacerbate human conflict. And so we really need to deal with all these things: climate justice, social justice, economic justice, and then also learn the tools for peacemaking, learn how to be in dialogue with each other. I mean, it seems like at least in where I live in the U.S., I think you all live in the U.S. as well, we're doing just the opposite right now. We're not able to have conversations with each other, and our commons and political landscape has become so divisive and so polarized. There's a wonderful organization out there. I think it's called, I think the name changed a bit. It has to do with that phrase, our better angels. So it may be called Better Angels or something like that. And they have these blue, red or red, blue programs. So they're bringing people across political divides to have dialogue, but they don't just bring them together. They put them through trainings and train them how to be in dialogue with people you disagree with, people who hold very different opinions, and how to have productive dialogue, right? So I think we all need training in that. I don't think you can expect to have peace or justice or the combination of the two without education and training. We have to learn how to do this. At the most basic level, I mean, we have a big, I know your organization has a big, called the BHAG, Big Hairy Audacious Goal. They call it, a huge goal. We have one as well. And our goal is to reach 1 billion people with self-regulation and co-regulation skills in the next 2 decades. Now, that's pretty huge. If we get anywhere close to that, it would be huge. But, we all need the skills to learn to self-regulate our own autonomic nervous system, our own physiology, which allows us to regulate our own emotions, which allows us to regulate our behaviors, which allows us to really be in the driver's seat of our own life, to be in a self-leadership position. And the more we're able to do that, we naturally develop discernment and wisdom, and we're going to begin to operate in our own long-term interest, which generally works out to be in the interest of everyone else, because long-term, we're all interconnected, right? So in the short term, it might feel, I might, feel like I can get ahead by taking advantage of someone. Or it might feel, good I'm really angry they hit somebody or something, but is that really in my long-term interest? No, it's really, I mean, I could end up in jail, I could end up in court, but even when I do things to take advantage, it's going to create ripple effects and that end up, even disadvantaging me at some point, and, just from a purely self-interest point of view. So our long-term self-interest is always in the interest of everyone. And so, if we can learn to self-regulate, we're going to start operating in our own, because we're getting better data and we're accessing our own innate intelligence. So we're going to start operating in ways that are wiser. And then our ability to self-regulate, actually, the same neural networks involved in deepening our internal perception, interoceptive awareness, the awareness of the internal landscape of the body, which is what really helps us self-regulate our own autonomic nervous system, our own physiology. The same neural networks are involved in our ability to create connection with each other and to co-regulate with others. I love Dr. Stephen Porges' polyvagal work, and he talks about when we have our social engagement system online, well, that means we're communicating safety, we're communicating connection, we're communicating relationship. And, we can do that even in the midst of a very challenging situation, to still learn how to bring my best self and be in a relational responsive mode and not get triggered back into that fear and survival reactive mode, right? Or even recognize what I am and learn how to turn it around and get myself back into that relational responsive mode where my social engagement system is online. And when that happens, it invites others. It invites others to have their social engagement system online. So, I mean, we've all had the experience when we met somebody, we just connected after that. We had this amazing conversation, or maybe even somebody we know well, but there was just a moment for somebody we came together and there was just this flow. We had this beautiful, well, that's natural organic co-regulation that's happening. There's a whole neurobiological process. The oxytocin's being released and we're feeling safe with each other. There's rapport, there's connection. So we can learn how to do that. These are trainable skills. So imagine a world where more and more human beings have the ability to self-regulate even in their own enlightened self-interest, and then how to co-regulate effectively with these others, so we can all be getting our needs met in reasonable ways, in win-win ways.
Mm-hmm. Love it. I totally love it. So on another note, I know you founded the Prison Mindfulness Institute and National Prison Hospice Association. Can you tell us the backstory on that?
Yes, well, I'm spent 14 years in a maximum security prison on drug charges. I was a baby boomer that came up through the 1960s and came of age in the 60s. And I kind of a classic angry young man, arrived in adolescence with a big hole in my gut. I mean, I grew up in a basically good Midwestern Roman Catholic family, but we had alcoholism in the family. And so one of my parents, sometimes showed up as the wonderful, loving parent, sometimes as this really scary rageaholic alcoholic. And, that started when I was very young. So that creates this real splitting, in you and on many, many levels. So, by the time I was a young adult and in late adolescence, I just had this raging hole in my gut and anger and trauma from that. And, but I'd still gotten a decent foundation, and my family did have good values. So it was a mixed bag, like it is for a lot of us. And so I graduated from high school in 1968, which was one of the most tumultuous years in U.S. history. The assassination of Martin Luther King and Bobby Kennedy, the Kent State killings, and just the racial was sometimes called riots, sometimes called rebellions, had been happening since 1965. I grew up in St. Louis. We had upheavals and every summer, and people were scared, and so I grew up in that context, and I just ended up going headlong. I really lost faith in the culture that was being presented to me, and so I went headlong into the counterculture of the time, and with no guidance, right? We kind of threw out the rule book, and we were making a big mess of things. But I knew I couldn't go back to that world that was being presented to me because I didn't believe in it anymore. So I was headlong into that world of, drug, sex, and rock and roll, and radical politics, and just all the rest of it. And it's I was also looking for something real. When I was a child, I felt very plugged into the world, like the world was kind of magical and real. And somewhere around starting school, it just went to gray tones, and I could never make peace with that. And I don't know whether it's just a natural developmental process or whether it had to do with the alcoholism on my family, but I wanted that being plugged in. I wanted the magic back. And of course, you find some maybe partially real elements, but kind of mirage elements of that in drug, sex, and rock and roll and all that stuff. But if you have an addictive propensity, then you're set up for addiction and all kinds of problems, right? So, at some point I realized that wasn't going anywhere, and I left the country looking for something real, something genuine. And it was also when Nixon was reelected in 1972, I just could not handle being in the country anymore. So I left and started traveling in Latin America as an expat, and living down there eventually as a way to not have to go back home, to stay down there and have some money. I got into small scale drug smuggling and I justified it with all this us versus them thinking. And eventually I came back to the States and got a master's degree, a deep 3-year clinical training program integrating Buddhist and Western psychology and training to work with people who were having severe disturbance, schizophrenia, psychosis. Very deep program, grounded in meditation, but both Western and Eastern methodologies and of psychotherapy and meditation and so forth. But I still had this shadow thing going on, involvement with drugs and alcohol, and eventually it all caught up with me, and I went to prison. But by the time I got to prison, I had all kinds of training, and that woke me up. My son was 9 years old at the time, so I was absolutely devastated over what I'd done to him. He was grew up without a dad. Originally, they said I'd be in prison for 30 years. Unfortunately, there was a lot of good time back then. I was sentenced before 1987 on what they call the old law. Took a while for me to figure that out, but eventually I figured out if I stayed out of trouble, I'd serve 18 and a half. I had a no parole sentence. So if I had a parolable sentence, I could have gone to the parole board, but I couldn't. But staying out of trouble, you get good time. So I would serve 18 and a half. Eventually, on my appeal, as my appeal went through the courts, they knocked off one count, brought my aggregate sentence from 30 to 25. And at that point, I knew I'd serve 14 and a half, which is what I did serve. But along the way, I did my time at the U.S. Medical Center for Federal Prisoners, and I got there as the AIDS epidemic, which is going into full swing. So I was at the right place at the right time. With another prison, we started the first hospice program in a prison anywhere in the world that we're aware of. And we brought in outside professionals and got trained ourselves and recruited other prisoners to be trained. And that was a big part of my life. My day job was teaching school. I got a job in the prison school. I had a 9-to-5 job Monday through Friday, helping other prisoners learn to read, get their GED, or get their or study for college classes, or learn English and so forth. And that was my day job for 14 years. But in my free time, I spent a lot of time in the hospital caring for men who were dying of AIDS and cancer and liver disease. And it was a huge part of my life, very transformative. I started a meditation group in the prison chapel that met twice a week. I was very involved in 12-step work, doing, my own recovery from addiction and alcohol abuse. And so it was a very transformative time in my life. I led a very, very disciplined life, of service and practice meditation several hours every day, studied 3 or 4 hours at night, didn't sleep much, just was kind of this prison monk, but very engaged in that community, serving that community. So it was an incredibly transformative time for myself. And out of that grew Prison Dharma Network, which is better known as Prison Mindfulness Institute. Actually has 3 divisions. We have work we do with correctional officers under the Center for Mindfulness and Public Safety. We do peace work and train mindfulness teachers to work with disadvantaged populations with a trauma-informed approach under Engaged Mindfulness Institute. And then we bring mindfulness into prisons for the prisoners, for our incarcerated fellow citizens under Prison Mindfulness Institute. But they're all under the same nonprofit. And then out of the hospice work we did there, I eventually started a national organization to get that while I was in prison. I started both these organizations while I was in prison. You're not supposed to be able to do that. I just did it, and they didn't stop me. I think it was too late by the time they realized it was going on. But anyway, I did it above board. I just didn't go ask permission. Anyway, as a result of National Prison Hospice Association, by the time I left prison, there were 75 prison hospices in state and federal prisons in the U.S. And that's one thing, that really helps me sleep at night. If I had to die tomorrow, I'd feel a certain amount of peace just having been able to bring that offering to the world. But again, I was in the right place at the right time.
That's fabulous.
Oh my gosh, I could just listen to you all day and the things that you've accomplished.
Me too. Wow. Amazing.
Wonderful. Yeah. I'd like to focus on meditation, and thank you for sharing with us, how much meditation means to you. It is our mode that we are using to bring more peace into the world. So what's your thoughts on meditating and how that can help to up the level of peace in our world?
Well, I think it's critical. I mean, whether you call it meditation or mind training or have practices for self-reflecting, awareness practices, I've been practicing meditation in one form or another for more than 50 years. My primary lineage has been the Tibetan Buddhist lineage. My first teacher was Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, who I met, who was the founder of Naropa University, which is where I got my master's degree. I graduated in 1979 from that 3-year clinical training. I went there to connect with him. Actually, I found out about him when I was living in South America when they started then the Naropa Institute in 1974. I knew I had to go there, but I've been trying to meditate on my own for a couple of years already, just out of books. Not very successfully, but I was trying, and I knew I needed more help. So I actually signed up for that program that I went to at Naropa, mostly because it was the program that had the most focus on meditation practice. Even though I had an undergraduate background in psychology, it was still that was the main driver for me. And I also have been practicing in the Zen tradition for a long time. While I was in prison, I connected with the work of my Zen teacher, Bernie Glassman, who was integrating Zen with with peace work and social justice work, formed the Zen Peacemaker Order. And so I've been when I got permission from my Tibetan teacher to study there as well. So I've been doing those 2 paths in parallel for a long, long time. I'm an empowered teacher in both those paths. I've been teaching meditation for about 40 years now, probably. And during prison, teaching, holding space for a meditation group was a big part of my life there. And when I got out, I started traveling and been teaching all over the world until the pandemic hit. And since then, it all shifted online, and I don't travel so much anymore. But I lead some Zen sessions here locally. Have done 1 or 2 of those a year for the last 2 years since the pandemic eased up a bit. But I do a lot of teaching online. And I've been studying all meditation traditions. I've studied deeply in different schools of Tibetan Buddhism, Zen Buddhism, Vipassana, different forms of Vedic meditation, more secular non-dual approaches, mainstream mindfulness, self-compassion practice. I consider myself a student of the art of meditation. And so I've been integrating a lot, and I've developed a model I call neurosomatic mindfulness, or neurosomatic meditation, which is a deeply embodied trauma-informed approach, which I feel really accelerates people's progress with the practice and helps more people stick with the practice, because so many people start meditation, they find it too difficult because they got a very busy mind and they just find themselves chasing thoughts, and it's hard and it's boring, and they struggle, and often they quit. And but with a deeply embodied approach, we can take advantage of ancient wisdom, but also current neuroscience, to really understand that by synchronizing body and mind very directly, we can allow the mind, we don't have to struggle with thoughts. We don't have to struggle with the mind. It'll naturally quiet down. The more we yoke our attention and the direct physical experience of the body, the mind naturally quiets down because we're facilitating a shift from the noisy default mode network of the brain to the attention stabilizing task positive network. And then we can, over time, our body, mind, heart system learns to, we begin with self-directed self-regulation. That's any kind of mind training meditation technique. But over time, we can shift into auto-regulation because the body-mind system is learning to regulate itself. And then eventually we tap into these deep internal states of flow, what have been called samadhi in some traditions, that have their own momentum. And we can move from kind of effortful practice to effortless practice. And then relax into and experience the deeper states of meditation and clarity and realization and so forth. So that's why I teach this very deeply embodied neuroscience informed approach called neurosomatic mindfulness. And I don't know when this episode will air to your community, but I do a lot of online summits throughout the year through Heart Mind Institute. And we're doing one right now that I'm very excited about that's going to run in January, but we'll run replays of it. So if this episode airs later than that, people will still be able to access it. It's going to be called the Art of Meditation Global Summit. And we're going to have somewhere between 57 and 60 speakers from Vipassana, Zen, Tibetan, Mahamudra Dzogchen, Shamatha Vipassana, Vedic meditation, the Abrahamic traditions, Jewish, Christian, Sufi, non-dual direct awakening approaches, mainstream mindfulness, self-compassion practice, as well as neuroscience-informed approaches and neuroscience research on meditation. So I'm very excited about that, and we're working hard and doing a lot of those interviews right now.
Fabulous. How can people reach you, Fleet?
Well, my basic website is fleetmaull.com, FLEETMAULL, fleetmaull.com, and that'll take you to almost everywhere else in my world eventually. But our summits and courses are at Heart Mind Institute, which is heartmind.co, not com, but to co.co. The prison work, prisonmindfulness.org or mindfulpublicsafety.org or engagedmindfulness.org.
Well, we'll have all of that information underneath your video. And,
well, I'd just like to mention my book very quickly. My book, Radical Responsibility, is being brought out in paperback edition January 30th. And so we're doing a big promotion now. And people, if they want to find out about that book and download a free chapter or even get the new paperback edition for free, they can go to that website, which is radicalresponsibilitybook.com, radicalresponsibilitybook.com.
Okay, wonderful. I'll tell you, it's been amazing to have you here as a guest. You are so informative and really so incredibly brilliant and just gorgeous energy.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been a joy, and thank you for the work you're doing. It's very important work. Thank you.